Hi there, and thank you for your interest in YaSM. My name is Stefan Kempter, and today I'm going to introduce our new and streamlined framework for managing services. What you're seeing here is a recorded version of the webinars we offer on our website. Obviously, you will not be able to ask any questions directly here in the video. But if you do have questions, you can always get in touch with us. Or of course, you can register for a live webinar. Before we begin, I'd also like to suggest that you watch this video in full screen mode at the highest resolution, because then you will be able to see all the details. And here are the topics we're going to cover today. First, I'd like to very briefly introduce ourselves, and then I'll explain what YaSM is about and how it relates to other service management frameworks and standards. We'll take a look at the YaSM Wiki and the YaSM Process Map, a set of process and document templates for organizations that want to get serious with introducing YaSM. And I will also tell you where you can find further information about YaSM. So let's get started with the next slide, which is about us. Our company, IT Process Maps, is a small but highly specialized company based in Bavaria, in Germany. It is run by my wife and myself, and you can see our pictures here. We started with a business on our own back in 2006, and before that we worked as IT managers and business consultants, which gave us a good combination of experiences for the business we run today. And that business is not actually a consulting business of the traditional sort. Instead, we provide service management knowledge in the form of process models. For most of the past years, we were active in the field of ITIL, and of course, we still offer process models for ITIL. But now we've developed a second product line called YaSM. So what's YaSM? YaSM stands for Yet Another Service Management Model, and it provides advice for organizations offering services. To understand why we created YaSM, we have to go back in time a little. For many years, we've been supplying a set of process and document templates for organizations that want to introduce ITIL-aligned processes, a product called the ITIL Process Map. That worked quite well. This process model is used by hundreds of organizations, but then surprisingly few of our customers seem to think that ITIL is just right. Some say ITIL isn't detailed enough. That might be a bit surprising, but these organizations are typically well advanced in their use of ITIL, and they are now looking for more specific advice, for example on how to improve security, on how to manage the many mobile devices in their organization, or say on how to deal with cloud services. And then there are people who say ITIL is too difficult. These people are often from smaller organizations or are new to ITIL. In this situation, it is obviously difficult to please everyone. But since we heard so often that something simpler would be welcome, we decided to create YaSM as a new and streamlined framework for those who find the existing guidance a bit too difficult. When creating YaSM, we first looked at ITIL, of course, but we also looked into other frameworks and standards such as USMBOK, ISO 20000, CMMI-SVC, and COBIT. And we also had some fresh ideas of our own. All these frameworks and standards have a lot of thinking in common. And YaSM is about capturing this common thinking in a streamlined framework. As you can see in this graphic, not all the circles representing the different frameworks are covered in full. And in fact, we would never pretend that YaSM is a complete COBIT process model. It's probably not possible to create something that covers every detail from all of these frameworks in full. One of the circles, the one representing ISO 20000, is covered in full, as you can see. That's not a coincidence, because when creating YaSM, we ensured that YaSM provides an answer for every single ISO 20000 requirement. I'll tell you a bit more about that towards the end of the presentation. And here's the result of our efforts. YaSM has a simple process structure with a number of lifecycle processes on top. And of course, this service lifecycle, if you know ITIL, will remind you of ITIL. But then, of course, ITIL is not alone in recommending this kind of cycle. We find the same concept, for example, in ISO 20000. Below the service lifecycle processes, we have a number of supporting processes, for example, for assessing and coordinating changes or for managing projects. And here we deviate a bit from ITIL because we think this way of arranging the processes makes the whole structure a lot more logical and easier to understand. And why is this more logical and easier to understand? Take change management, for example. Change management in ITIL is a part of service transition, because many changes naturally will be needed as we build new services. But then changes are also needed in other areas, for example, as we improve the services, as we resolve problems, or as we implement some security mechanisms. So changes occur all over the place, not only during the service transition phase. And that's why we say it makes much more sense to have a supporting process, as we do for assessing and coordinating changes. It just makes the whole structure more logical, and that process can be called upon from anywhere where a change is needed. So with its simple process structure, YaSM provides a streamlined starting point for organizations that want to improve the provisioning of their services. And it makes it easy to understand the key principles of service management best practice. Mind you, YaSM is not a standard that must be implemented. It contains recommendations, and in fact, we would not expect you to follow every bit of advice to the letter. You can adapt what we provide to the needs of your organization. We also try to avoid language that is overly specific for providers of IT services, because we think service management best practice can and should be used by any organization providing services. Since YaSM is based on well-known principles, it is not difficult to master if you know ITIL or ISO 20000, for example. In fact, I can say that if you know ITIL or ISO 20000, you will feel at home instantly, and the same should apply for other frameworks like COBIT or USMBOK. And indeed, you can use YaSM in combination with other guidelines if you need additional advice. Now, when preparing this presentation, I was thinking about how best to explain how YaSM manages to be both streamlined and complete. And I think the best way of explaining this is to show you a couple of ITIL processes and what we made of these processes in YaSM. The first example is from service operation. In ITIL, we have a couple of processes for managing incidents, problems, and service requests. In YaSM, we have more or less the same processes as part of service operation. In YaSM, we also have processes for resolving incidents and problems, and so on. So here in this area, there is a lot of similarity between ITIL and YaSM. The next example is about managing changes. In ITIL, we have two processes for this purpose. The first one is change management, and then there is a second process for evaluating changes. In YaSM, we say that one process is enough, so in YaSM we have a simple, streamlined process for assessing and coordinating changes. So in this case, we simplified things a bit. Then we have an example which is about managing, coordinating major service management initiatives. In ITIL, we mainly have two processes for this purpose. We have one in service design coordination, which is meant to coordinate service design activities, as the name suggests. Then in service transition, we have a process for planning service transition activities. It's called transition planning and support. In YaSM, we take a somewhat different approach. In YaSM, we have a process for managing projects. That process is quite versatile. It can be used for managing and planning and coordinating every major service management initiatives. So, for instance, if a new service needs to be set up, we would start up a project, and then the project management process would coordinate everything from beginning to end. In our experience, this is what most organizations do anyway. They would start up a project if a new service needs to be created, and then a project manager would plan and coordinate everything until the new service goes live. And these organizations do not see why coordinating the design phase or the transition phase should be anything special. So I think what we are doing here is quite in line with the way many organizations work. Then in the last example, I would like to talk about a couple of processes in ITIL that many people find especially hard to grasp. These processes are demand management, service level management, capacity, and availability management. Capacity management, for instance, is a part of service design, but then right at the beginning, where the capacity management process is described, ITIL says that the process is active in every other phase of the service lifecycle. Now that, of course, makes it a bit hard to figure out how to implement such a process in practice. In YaSM, again, we take a slightly different approach. Of course, we still manage service capacity, but we do not have a capacity management process. Instead, we have embedded activities in every stage of the service lifecycle, in every lifecycle process, for managing service capacity. So, for example, if a new service needs to be designed, then we figure out what kind of capacity is needed and how we can provide that capacity. Then we would build that capacity, and during service operation, we would monitor the service capacity, the use of capacity on a regular basis to check whether capacity is sufficient. If there are capacity shortages, we may need to add additional capacity by way of setting up a service improvement initiative. So, in this way, we have activities embedded in the service lifecycle processes, which combined ensure that service capacity is properly managed. And these mechanisms are fairly easy to implement. So much about how YaSM relates to ITIL. If you want to know more about YaSM, then all you have to do is go to the YaSM Wiki, where we explain the concept in detail. On the YaSM website, you'll find a link to the YaSM Wiki. And if I click on that link, that takes us to the Wiki's main page, with an overview of the different areas available in the Wiki. There is one big section about the YaSM processes. Then we explain in the Wiki how YaSM relates to other service management frameworks and standards. And we provide information about the terms and data objects we use in YaSM. This section includes the YaSM glossary and the complete YaSM data model. And we also provide some background information on the YaSM roles. In particular, there's a list of the YaSM roles with their definitions and a complete RACI matrix. Now, if we go into the process section and then further down to one of the pages for a YaSM main process, such as the service design process, then you will see, if I zoom in a bit, you will see that for every YaSM main process, such as service design, you get first of all a graphic like this, with the main information flows. Then a bit further down, we have a list of the sub-processes with their definitions, a list of the process outputs, again with their definitions, and at the end of the page, you get a complete RACI matrix. As you can see, the YaSM Wiki contains a wealth of information. In fact, you will find everything in there to familiarize yourself with YaSM. And if your organization wants to get serious with introducing YaSM, we also offer a product with even better information. The YaSM Process Map is a ready-to-use and adaptable set of process diagrams and document templates. The Process Map is, for now, available in English and German on two platforms, Visio and ARIS. So you can get the YaSM model as Visio diagrams or as a complete ARIS process model. Since Visio is a very popular application, we're now going to have a look at the YaSM Process Map for Visio. I hope you're now able to see my Visio application window with the front page of the YaSM Process Map. The front page is kind of a portal with links from where you can reach the different components included in our process model. One of the more important links on this diagram is this one. It takes us to the top-level process diagram. But before we take that link, I would like to explain that in Visio there are two possibilities for activating a link. First, you can right-click on a shape, and then you will find the link in the context menu. This works in all versions of Visio. In the more recent versions of Visio, you can also hold down the Control key. See, this makes my cursor change. And then you can simply click on the shape. That's what I do now. And that takes us to the top-level diagram with an overview of all YaSM processes. At the top we have the service lifecycle processes, and at the bottom we have the supporting processes. And now, let's zoom in a bit. And now, if we want to know, say, how things work in service design, we can take a link from here and go down to the next level of detail, where we get to see more about service design. In these diagrams, we always display the inputs on the left. So here on the left you can see which other YaSM processes send what inputs into service design. At the right we can see the outputs from service design and where they go to. And in the center part we have processes from service design. So here in the center part we explain in a bit more detail how things work in service design. We use two types of shapes in these diagrams. The green shapes represent processes and the orange shapes represent data or information objects. And these shapes are aligned with BPMN, or Business Process Model and Notation. Probably you've heard of it. BPMN is often used these days for documenting business processes. Now, we use information objects to depict information flows between the processes, because in these diagrams we want to show not only what processes are there, but also how the processes cooperate. That's an important principle, because these diagrams are meant to explain how things work in YaSM. Here, for example, we can see that service design starts with a first process which is about defining the required service properties. From here we get an output, the draft service definition, which defines the properties of the service to be created. And this document is passed along as an input to the next process, which takes care of designing the required infrastructure. Obviously, we will need to know the properties of the service to be created for designing the infrastructure. So, by showing the information flows between the processes in these diagrams, we explain how things work in service design. And now, from here, if we want to know in more detail how the design of the required infrastructure is done, we can again click on a link and go down to the third level of detail, where we have swim lanes and single activities. But let's first zoom in on the top part of this diagram, where we have a complete account of all the inputs required for this process and where they come from, and also a list of the outputs from the process and where they go to. And then in the top right-hand corner, we have the superior processes. So, with these links, we can go up again in the hierarchy of details, say back to the overview diagram of service design, and again into the sub-process. So here we can see where we are, and we can go up again in the process hierarchy. And then let's move to the bottom part of this diagram, where we have swim lanes with activities and roles. Roles are represented by yellow shapes in our process model. And I think it's almost self-explanatory what we're trying to say here. We say that the service design manager, the service owner, and two more roles should cooperate to first identify the required infrastructure and other capabilities, then to specify the required modifications to the infrastructure, and so on. Until the process ends here at the right-hand side with an end event. And at the end of this process, we have a draft service implementation blueprint ready. Now, if you want to know how does this go on from here, what's going on in the next process, then you would move up again in this diagram where we have the process outputs. And there we can see the service implementation blueprint going to the next process, which is about outlining the implementation approach. Of course, if you click on this link, then you would be able to jump right into the subsequent process to see how this goes on. Wherever there is a green process shape in our process diagrams, there is a link behind it taking you to a process diagram. And this was the first part of my presentation. I wanted to show you how you navigate in the process model and what kind of detail you can expect to find in our products. Now, as a next step, let's have a quick look at the shapes we have here in front of us. A process shape like this one does have a couple of attributes. We call them shape data fields in Visio, and as you can see here at the right hand side of my screen, in the shape data window we have a process name and a description of the process, a reference number, the information where it belongs to, and also a status value. The status value can be handy if you introduce the processes step by step. If a process is, say, in the planning stage, you could enter in planning here, and that makes the shape turn gray. So by entering anything different than active in here, you can gray out things like processes or also data objects. And once they are active, like this will turn green again. The same applies to the data objects. They also have a name and also a brief description attached to them and a status value. But what's more, the data objects also have links. Two of them, and the first one points to a checklist. If I click on that link, this will open up Word and the checklist for the service implementation blueprint. As you can see, this checklist explains the structure of the information we would typically expect to find in a service implementation blueprint. So it's in fact a rather detailed explanation of this document. And of course, because it comes in Word format, you can also use this checklist as a template or starting point if you need to create the service implementation blueprints in your organization. Now let's close the checklist and then take a look at the second link behind a data object. The second link points to a lifecycle diagram. The lifecycle diagrams are available for every data object we use in YaSM, and as you can see, if I zoom in a bit, it provides you with a complete picture, in this case, of the service implementation blueprint. Because this diagram explains where, in what processes, the service implementation blueprints are created and updated and read and also archived. So this provides you with a complete picture in one simple diagram. Now let's close a few windows because I want to go back to the front page. And there we can take a look at some of the other components which are included in the YaSM Process Map. First we have a process structure diagram. If we open it, you can see that this diagram explains the complete structure of the YaSM processes. So you can see all the main processes and the sub-processes. And apart from providing a complete overview, you can of course also use this for navigating the process model. You can open an overview diagram like this one, the service design process, or go directly into a sub-process. So all of this is possible from here, from this complete process structure diagram. Then we have a couple of diagrams about the YaSM data objects. We have one diagram with a simple overview of the YaSM data objects. This is not very spectacular, so we're going to have a look at the next one, which is the YaSM data object model. I click on the link and open the data model, and if we zoom in a bit, then, or maybe like this, zoom in a bit more, then you can see that this diagram provides a complete overview of all the documents and records we use in YaSM, with their main relationships. And by showing the main relationships between the different objects, we give you some good idea about what they are good for. Then we also offer a RACI matrix. The RACI matrix is not a Visio diagram, but it comes in the form of an Excel matrix. We zoom in a bit, then you will see that our RACI matrix, like any, has all the rows here in the top row, and down here at the left-hand side we have all the YaSM processes. And in the center part of the matrix we indicate levels of responsibility. An R, for example, means responsibility for performing a couple of activities in a process. And an A stands for accountable. This indicates process ownership. In this case, we have the incident manager owning a process. Apart from being a very good overview of the responsibilities of the various YaSM roles in the YaSM processes, this matrix can also be used for navigating the process model, starting from a role perspective. If, for example, the configuration manager wants to know precisely what is his responsibility here in the process, he can click on the link because the process names here are equipped with links. And if I click on this, this will open the Visio diagram. Now it pops up down here. And then if we zoom in a little and move downwards, then we can see precisely what the responsibility of the configuration manager in this process would be. So we can use the RACI matrix also as an alternative way of navigating the process model, starting from a role perspective. Let's close the matrix and go back to the front page diagram and move a bit down to take a look at the other components here. We have a number of documents. We're not actually going to look into these in detail. That's basically a lot of text, and opening all of them would be a bit boring. But at least I would like to mention that we include manuals, such as an introduction to YaSM. This explains the YaSM concept. Then we have an implementation guide describing how YaSM can be implemented in a number of steps, and for every step it would say how the YaSM Process Map supports it. There's also a user manual. In there you will find information, for example, on the Visio shapes we use in the Visio diagrams. Then we explain in a number of documents how YaSM relates to other service management frameworks and standards. These are PDF documents included in the YaSM Process Map, but of course the information you find in here is the same you would also find in the YaSM Wiki. And then finally, there are also a number of quick references. There is a YaSM glossary, there are process descriptions, there is a complete table of the process inputs and outputs, and there is a list of all the YaSM roles with their descriptions. And also, last but not least, a collection of process metrics. Then, down at the bottom, we have an additional component for organizations that want to get certified against ISO 20000. We call this component the YaSM ISO 20000 Bridge. The bridge has a front page with links to the different documents and diagrams. And first of all, up here is a link to the original ISO 20000 document. It comes in the form of a PDF and it contains a long list of requirements. We scroll down a little to the service delivery processes and then enlarge this a bit. Then we can see a typical example for a requirement. The service provider shall agree the services to be delivered with the customer. If you want to get certified, you have to fulfill all these requirements. But ISO 20000 will not tell you how you should go about fulfilling these requirements. And that's where the YaSM ISO 20000 Bridge comes into the picture. The bridge has the same structure as the ISO 20000 document, and for every section there is a diagram that can be opened with a link. In these diagrams we have here at the left-hand side a column with all the requirements. So in fact in these diagrams you will find every single requirement that must be fulfilled. Then next to every requirement we say what process or what processes should be in place to fulfill the requirement. In this case here we say that in order to fulfill this requirement you should have a process for managing customer relationships. Of course, this is a process from the YaSM model. So if you click on the link behind that shape, that will open up a process diagram where you can see all the details of the process in question. So in fact what you get is rather specific advice on how to fulfill every single requirement. Then, a bit further to the right, we also state what related evidence should be in place. Think of related evidence as kind of proof that a process is actually in use and doesn't only exist on paper. That's typically checked during a certification audit. And if you are able to show your auditor a couple of documents, such as service agreements, then he will probably believe that your processes are in use. Of course, also for the evidence, you get specific advice in the form of checklists. We've seen the checklists before as part of the YaSM process model. Here is an example of the checklist for the customer service agreement, and it explains the typical contents of such agreements. So for every piece of evidence you should have in place, you get a ready-to-use template. Then, in the column on the right, we have comments. We explain in this column exactly how the requirements are fulfilled. But of course, you can also add your very own comments here. And if we move again to the left, we can see that there are also circles here next to every requirement. And you can use these circles to apply some color coding. If, for example, a requirement is fulfilled, you can apply green. And orange may mean that something still needs to be done about the requirement. So in this way, you can use this diagram as kind of a dashboard as you prepare for the certification. I think it's fair to say that these diagrams here provide you with a very good starting point if you want to get certified against ISO 20000. And now, before we finish, I would like to explain very briefly how you can modify these diagrams. Because I would expect that you will want to adapt these diagrams to the needs of your organization, which is of course okay, because YaSM is a set of recommendations, it's not something you need to implement to the letter. My first message here is that you can do to these diagrams whatever is possible in Visio. You can add any kind of shape that is available. There are no locks of any kind in this product. But you can use a number of features we provide that will help you with modifying the diagrams. First, we have a collection of master shapes. You can see them down here in the document stencil. These are the shapes we used ourselves when creating the original diagrams. And now you can also use them, for example, if you want to add an additional activity to this process. You pick a task shape from the document stencil and drop it on the diagram. Then you adjust the sequence flow a bit, like this. Then add an additional sequence flow, and then put in some text into the new activity. Do something, whatever. Of course, you can also change the text in an activity or in a note, or indeed you can also delete things that you do not need. So this is simple enough. Let's now move a bit up in this diagram, where we have different types of shapes, data objects and processes. Probably you can imagine by now that something like a data object representing the service implementation blueprint is used in many diagrams. And whenever we use it, we want it to have the same link to the checklist and the same link to its lifecycle diagram, and also the correct description here in the shape data field. And we do not want to enter this information manually every time we have a service implementation blueprint in a process. That's why we provide a repository, kind of a database for data objects and also for processes. And we also provide with the product kind of a macro. It's called a Visio add-in. And if you install the add-in, you get to see a number of additional commands here in the add-ins tab. And now you are able to do the following. You can create a fresh data object like this one. Let's place this in the right position. And then you can click on the select command. And this brings up a list of all the data objects defined in the YaSM process model. We can now enter a search pattern like this and pick an object from the list. And this will set the name of the object. This will set the link to the checklist and to the lifecycle diagram, and it will also set the description of the object. The same works for the processes. You can also create a fresh process shape like this, and then use the select command. And this sets the process name, the description of the process, and so on. And also the link behind the process shape now points to the correct process diagram. So we have a simple mechanism here for picking items from the repository and inserting shapes into the Visio diagrams. The repository is not actually a database, but an Excel file with a couple of tables. For instance, here we have the process table, where we define all the processes contained in the YaSM Process Map. Each process is defined in one row, and every row starts with a unique ID. Then we have the process properties, like process name, its description, the superior process, and the status value. These properties are, of course, stored in the shape data fields in Visio. Then we also define in the repository the link to the process diagram. I'm not going to explain all the details here, because that would take too long. And anyway, we have a special video on this topic, and also in the user manual you will find all background information on the repository feature. So much about the YaSM process model in Visio. If you purchase a license, you will also benefit from our personal and friendly support, which includes product updates, answers to questions about YaSM, and technical support. The service is free of charge during the first year. And that's more or less what I wanted to present today. If you'd like to learn more about YaSM in general or the YaSM products, please visit the YaSM Wiki or the YaSM website. And of course, you can also get in touch with us if you have any questions. At yasm.com you will find a contact form and our complete contact information. Thanks again for watching, and take care.